If you're hearing this, I didn't make it out. Or maybe I did, and what's left of me isn't really me anymore. I don't know. Everything's kind of smeared together now, memories that aren't mine, moments happening in the wrong order, places that rearrange themselves when you stop looking. But I have to get this out. You have to hear it before it finds someone else. This post might not last long. Last time I tried to upload something like this, the file corrupted itself in real time. I watched the waveform flatten and loop back on itself like a thing pretending to have a voice. Reddit nuked the thread. Archive.org saved a broken shell of the page with one comment. Too late. So screenshot everything. Save this. Mirror it if you can. Because once this disappears, that's when it starts. I went looking for a place that technically doesn't exist. Not on Google Maps. Not on county records. Not on modern surveyor charts. But I found it tucked away on an old war-era topographical map scanned into a forgotten government archive from 1948. It wasn't highlighted or labeled like the other towns, just a little black dot. No roads leading to it. Handwritten beneath it, almost lazily, was the name, Grayer Ridge. That's what started everything. I used to be one of those fringe content creators. You've seen my stuff. Weird history, liminal mysteries, abandoned America. I loved peeling back the layers of reality and finding the wounds cities try to stitch closed. It was fun, harmless, until this one. Grayer Ridge was different. There were patterns. Forum posts that vanished mid-sentence. Rumors about a radio station that broadcasts there on a frequency no one else can pick up. A blogger 12 years ago who claimed to visit and then suddenly pivoted their entire account to gardening tips. Except they misspelled their own name for 6 months straight. It eats your truths. That's what I figured out. Or what someone wanted me to figure out. I don't think it kills you exactly. It just replaces what you were. People have been disappearing around Grayer Ridge for decades. That's the part no one can piece together because it isn't loud. No Amber Alerts. No media coverage. Just receipts with names scratched out. Grocery deliveries unclaimed. A comment under an obscure YouTube video saying, "I had a brother named Jackson. I think. I can't picture him anymore." Problem is, once you see it, it sees you. Sorry, I feel like I'm ranting. You're probably wondering what I saw, what really happened. You want the story. And God knows how long I've got left before this uploads with static in the middle, or someone knocks on the door that I don't remember having. So yeah, let me start from the beginning. The map, the drive, the town with the wrong-looking faces. Let me take you back to where it started. I've always chased the weird. When most people go looking for weekend getaways, I go looking for holes. Gaps in the data. Places that feel too quiet. High school towns where every house has a light on, but no one answers the door. Somewhere between local legends and creeping dead ends, I find the stuff that makes people ask, why haven't I heard of this before? This started out like that. 3 months ago, I was digging through a digitized microfilm archive. Don't judge me for an unrelated video I was producing. It was supposed to be about Cold War-era ghost towns and forgotten fallout shelters. Standard clickbait stuff. While scrubbing through some 1940s ordinances, I found something strange buried in the borderlands between 2 counties. A dot. Just a dot. No road that led to it. No population statistics. Just a little black mole on the map, northeast of Patton Creek, penciled in like an afterthought and in faded handwriting, the words Grayer Ridge. I assumed it was a clerical error at first, or a farmstead that never incorporated. But when I reverse image searched the scan and cross-referenced it with everything from census logs to amateur cartography forums, nothing. Not one mention of Grayer Ridge in any modern source. Not even conspiracy forums. Which, honestly, made it weirder. The moment I said the name out loud, the room got cold. Not metaphorically. I mean my laptop started glitching. Minor stuff, cursor lag. Audio static when I played music. My internet dropped to 0 bars even though my modem was 5 feet away. Harmless? Sure. But it was the kind of harmless that knows it's being watched. I chalked it up to stress. I've been at this long enough to know how rabbit holes mess with your head. But I couldn't let it go. I submitted a routine FOIA request, nothing fancy, and redacted documents came back. Redacted. For a nameless scrap of land. That's how the FBI flagged a non-existent town. It gets worse. I mentioned Grayer Ridge once during a Discord call with acquaintances from the weird web community, just testing the waters, seeing if anyone had heard of locals or urban legends associated with that region. Someone muttered, "Don't dig there," and left the call. They never responded to my DMs after that. Another guy, I won't name him, posted a blog entry 2 years ago about a town with perfect symmetry and no birds. I'm not saying it was about Grayer Ridge, but the GPS coordinates he posted were within 30 miles. His post ends mid-sentence, like he leaned on the delete key. That blog's dead now. So is his YouTube channel. So is he, apparently. The obituary just says, "accidental fall." I should have stopped there, I know. I even closed the file and walked away for a couple of days. But something about that name had stuck. Like a melody I never remembered learning. Like a whisper that wasn't in my language, but I understood anyway. I loaded up my car. Gear, gas, offline maps. I wasn't taking chances. By nightfall, I was headed northeast, back road after back road, like the map was folding. Behind me, my GPS started doing this thing where it showed me driving over pure green. No streets, just open land. And the buzzing. Yeah, that started too. In my ears. A high-pitched whine, like an old TV stuck between channels. Not painful, just present. Constant, unignorable, like something humming just beneath the skin of the world. I should have turned back when the radio started playing voices in a language I know doesn't exist. When the signs for the nearest town turned blank. When the gas station I stopped at had no prices on the pumps. But I didn't turn back. I went in. The first thing I noticed was the silence. Not the peaceful kind, but the kind that feels like a held breath. Grayer Ridge didn't look abandoned, far from it. It looked preserved, like a diorama behind glass, untouched by time or weather or even dust. I rolled down Main Street, and it was like driving into a faded photograph. The storefronts were painted in colors that had gone out of style decades ago: seafoam green, mustard yellow, a red so deep it looked almost black in the shade. The signs above the shops were hand-lettered, not a single LED in sight. There was a barber shop with a spinning pole, a diner with a neon sign that flickered EATS, and a hardware store with a window display of tools that looked like they'd never been used. People were out, too. Not many, but enough to make it feel like a real place. A man in a pressed white shirt swept the sidewalk in front of the post office. 2 women in floral dresses chatted on a bench, their laughter a little too sharp, a little too rehearsed. A group of kids played hopscotch on the cracked pavement, their voices echoing off the brick. But something was off. Everyone's clothes were a little too clean, a little too pressed. No one had a phone out. No one wore headphones. I passed a teenager leaning against a lamppost, and he was reading a newspaper, an actual, physical newspaper, dated years ago. When he looked up, his eyes lingered on me a second too long, like he was memorizing my face for later. I parked in front of the diner, and as I stepped out, the air felt thick, almost syrupy. The bell above the door jingled as I walked in, and every head turned. The waitress behind the counter smiled, but her lips didn't quite reach her eyes. "Passing through?" she asked, her voice bright and brittle. "Just exploring," I said, trying to sound casual. "Heard this place had some history." She nodded, pouring coffee into a chipped mug. "We get folks like you sometimes." "Not often. Not for long." I glanced around. The booths were filled with people who looked like they'd stepped out of a 1950s yearbook. A man in a suit and fedora read the classifieds. A little girl in braids colored quietly, her crayon never leaving the lines. I paid in cash, no card reader, no receipt. When I asked about Wi-Fi, the waitress just laughed. "We like things simple here." As I left, I caught a flicker of movement in the window above the hardware store. Someone was watching me, camera in hand, the lens glinting in the sunlight. But when I looked again, the curtain fell shut, and the window was empty. I wandered the streets, trying to get my bearings. But the more I walked, the less sense the layout made. Streets curved back on themselves. An alley I'd just passed was suddenly gone. The sun never seemed to move, stuck in a perpetual late afternoon. A little girl tugged at my sleeve as I passed the playground. Her eyes were too old for her face. "You'll be part of it soon," she whispered, then skipped away before I could ask what she meant. I tried to leave, But every turn brought me back to the same intersection, the same diner, the same faces watching from behind glass. That night, I locked my motel door and tried to sleep. But when I woke up, my shoes were caked with mud and there were leaves in my hair. I woke up with mud on my shoes and no memory of going anywhere. The Airbnb was a squat little bungalow on the edge of town, all peeling paint and floral wallpaper that had yellowed into a nicotine haze. The listing had called it cozy and historic. I was starting to realize that in Grayer Ridge, historic meant untouched by time, or maybe by reality. The first night, I tried to convince myself the weirdness was just travel fatigue. But the house had its own ideas. The floorboards creaked in patterns that didn't match my footsteps. The pipes groaned, but only when I was silent. And every so often, I'd hear a faint, rhythmic tapping like someone drumming their fingers on the underside of the floor. I told myself it was mice, or the house settling, or maybe the world's most persistent woodpecker. But the sound was too deliberate, too curious. On the second night, I dropped my phone behind the bed. When I reached down to grab it, my hand brushed something cold and metallic. I pulled back the faded quilt and saw, half hidden by dust bunnies and a warped floorboard, a rusted iron ring. I tugged, and a square of wood shifted, revealing the outline of a trapdoor nailed shut, the heads of the nails hammered flat and painted over. I stared at it for a long time, heart thumping. Every horror movie I'd ever watched flashed through my mind. This was the part where the audience yells at the screen, "Don't open it, you idiot." But of course, I did exactly that. Or at least, I tried. The nails wouldn't budge. I pried at them with a butter knife, but they were sunk deep, as if someone had wanted to make sure nothing and no one could get through. The next morning, I cornered the landlord, a wiry man with a permanent squint and a voice like gravel. I asked him, as casually as I could, about the trapdoor. He blinked at me, slow and blank. "What trapdoor?" "The one under the bed," I said, trying to keep my tone light. "It's nailed shut. Kind of hard to miss." He shook his head, lips twitching into a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "You must be mistaken. Old houses have quirks. Maybe you saw a knot in the wood." I pressed, but he just shrugged and shuffled away, muttering about city folk and their imaginations. That night, he showed up at my door, reeking of whiskey and sweat. He leaned in close, breath hot and sour. "Don't dig," he slurred, jabbing a finger at my chest. "Some things are better left under the floor." He staggered off before I could ask what he meant. I tried to sleep, but the tapping came back, louder this time. It wasn't random anymore. It was a patterned 3 knocks, pause, 2 knocks, pause, then a long, slow scrape. I pressed my ear to the floor, and for a moment, I thought I heard a voice, muffled and distant, whispering my name. I told myself I was imagining it, that I was just tired, or maybe the town was getting under my skin. But the voice kept coming, soft and insistent, like a memory I couldn't quite place. Finally, desperate for answers, or maybe just to prove I wasn't losing my mind, I knocked back 3 times, just like it had. The voice stopped. The silence was absolute. Then, from beneath the floor, something knocked twice in response. I tried to shake off the night's events, but the echo of those knocks followed me into the morning. I needed answers, or at least a distraction, so I did what I always do when a place doesn't make sense. I went looking for its history. Every town has a story, right? Births, deaths, scandals, tragedies. But Grayer Ridge. Grayer Ridge was a blank page pretending to be a book. The town square was picture perfect, all whitewashed benches and flower beds, a clock tower that never seemed to move past 317. I ducked into the municipal building, expecting the usual, dusty ledgers, faded photos, maybe a wall of plaques for local heroes. Instead, I found a single filing cabinet, locked. The receptionist, a woman with a smile, so wide it looked painful, told me the archives were under renovation. She handed me a glossy pamphlet about the town's annual harvest festival and asked if I'd be staying long. I asked about the cemetery. Every town has one, even if it's just a patch of overgrown grass behind a church. She blinked, her smile never faltering. "We don't have one. Folks here live long, happy lives." I pressed. "So, where do people go when they die?" She laughed, a brittle, glassy sound. "We don't worry about that here. You should try the bakery. Best apple pie in the county." I left, unsettled. Outside, I watched the townspeople go about their day. Young faces everywhere, kids, teens, adults in the prime of life. No one with gray hair. No one with a limp or a cane. No one old. It was like the town had pressed pause on aging and thrown away the remote. I wandered toward the edge of town, where the buildings thinned out and the trees pressed closer. That's where I found the old mill. It was a hulking, rotting thing, boards nailed across the doors and windows, a faded sign warning "No entry." The grass around it was dead, brittle underfoot. As I stood there, a group of locals passed by on the other side of the street. Their conversation died instantly. One of them, a man with a jaw set too tight, caught my eye and shook his head, almost imperceptibly. I got the message. The mill was off limits. Back at the Airbnb, I checked my email. A reply had come in from a user on an urban legend forum I'd posted to, someone with the handle Night Watch. The message was short, almost frantic. "Grayer Ridge doesn't bury its dead. It keeps them. Get out while you can." I tried to reply, but the account was already deleted. I needed proof. I remembered a YouTube video I'd seen weeks ago, grainy footage of the town square, a voiceover talking about the place that time forgot. I pulled it up, but halfway through, the video glitched. The screen went black, then flashed a single frame of the old mill, door ajar, something pale, moving inside. Then the video was gone. Deleted. The channel, too. That's when the nosebleed started. Just a trickle at first, then enough to stain my pillow. I lost track of time, hours slipping by, whole afternoons vanishing. I'd find myself standing in the middle of the street, no memory of how I got there. Once, I woke up with my hands covered in dirt, the taste of iron in my mouth. That night, my phone buzzed with a voicemail. I played it, and a woman's voice, raw with terror, screamed, "Don't look in the mirrors. They remember." Then static, and a sound like something heavy being dragged across wood. I stared at my reflection in the darkened window, and for a moment, I thought it smiled back. I needed to get out, even if just for a few hours. The town was closing in, and my thoughts were starting to feel like borrowed clothes, familiar, but not quite mine. I drove until the roads straightened out, until the air felt lighter and the sky looked like it belonged to the real world again. I ended up at a nursing home in the next county, following a lead from a comment I'd found buried in an old forum thread. "Ask for Ruth. She remembers." Ruth was waiting for me in a sunlit room that smelled of lemon polish and wilted flowers. She was small, her hair a cloud of white, her eyes sharp and restless. When I introduced myself and mentioned Grayer Ridge, she flinched, her hands curling into fists. "I got out," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. 40 years ago, I ran until my shoes fell apart, but I left everything behind. Everything. I asked her what she meant. She stared at the window, her reflection ghostly in the glass. "I don't remember my parents' faces. I don't remember my own birthday. I don't even know if Ruth is my real name. The town, it eats your memories before it eats you." I felt a chill crawl up my spine. I'd heard stories like this before, people who'd lost time, lost themselves, after visiting places that shouldn't exist. I'd covered cases like this on my channel. The man who forgot his wife after a night in the Devil's Hollow. The woman who spoke in riddles after camping near the Black Pines. But this was different. This was personal. I tried to press her for details, but she shook her head, tears welling in her eyes. It's like trying to remember a dream you never had. I know I was there. I know I left. But everything in between is just gone. Sometimes I think I see it in my dreams. The mill, the faces, the way the streets move when you're not looking. I felt a flicker of panic. My own memories were starting to blur at the edges. I couldn't remember what I'd eaten for breakfast, or the name of my first pet, or the last time I called my sister. I tried to ground myself, listing the cases I'd covered, the places I'd been. But even those felt slippery, like they belonged to someone else. Ruth reached out and grabbed my hand, her grip surprisingly strong. "Listen to me. I think the town appears to people who are already marked. People who've seen too much or asked the wrong questions. It's not just a place. It's a hunger. It wants to be remembered, so it takes your memories for itself. For a moment, I felt a real connection, a lifeline thrown across decades of silence. I wanted to ask her how she escaped, what she'd seen, if there was any way to fight back. But then, mid-sentence, Ruth's eyes rolled back. She bit down hard on her tongue, blood spilling from her mouth. The nurse rushed in, pulling me away as Ruth convulsed, her words dissolving into a wet, gurgling scream. I stumbled out, shaken, and got back in my car. I drove, desperate to put distance between myself and Grayer Ridge. But every road curved back. Every sign pointed me toward the town center. The GPS spun in circles, the same song playing on every station. No matter how far I drove, I always ended up back where I started, under the unblinking gaze of the clock tower, the hands frozen at 3:17. I didn't sleep that night. The air in Grayer Ridge felt charged, like the moment before a thunderstorm. By dusk, the town had transformed. Paper lanterns hung from every porch, glowing in soft pinks and golds, their light flickering against the gathering dark. Children darted through the streets, laughter trailing behind them like ribbons, but their eyes were wide and watchful, as if they were waiting for something or someone. I kept to the shadows, hugging the side of the hardware store, trying to make sense of the sudden shift. The townspeople moved with purpose, hanging masks on their doors white, featureless faces with hollow eyes. Some wore the masks themselves, their voices muffled as they chanted words I couldn't quite catch. The language was old, the syllables heavy and strange, like a prayer or a warning. No one looked at me. It was as if I'd become invisible, or maybe just irrelevant. I watched as families gathered in tight circles, holding hands, their faces tense with anticipation. The air was thick with the scent of burning sage and something sweeter, almost cloying. Then, as the last sliver of sun slipped behind the trees, a hush fell over the town. Every lantern went out at once, plunging the square into darkness. The only sound was the wind rattling the dead grass around the old mill. A door creaked open, the crowd parted, and a figure stepped out from the mill's shadow. He moved slowly, as if learning how to walk again. His skin was translucent, veins and bones visible beneath the surface, and his eyes, his eyes were like shards of broken mirrors, reflecting everything and nothing at once. A little girl broke from the crowd, her mask dangling from one hand. She ran to the figure, her voice trembling. "Daddy." The man knelt, reaching for her with hands that shook. The crowd watched in silence as she pressed her face to his chest, sobbing. For a moment, it was almost beautiful, a reunion, a miracle. But then the man looked up, and I saw his mouth twist into a smile that was all wrong, too wide, too hungry. A scream tore through the night, shattering the silence. The girl's mother pulled her away, clutching her so tightly the child's feet left the ground. The man staggered, his form flickering like a bad signal, and the crowd began to chant again, louder this time, their voices rising in a desperate, discordant song. I realized, with a sick jolt, that there were others emerging from the mill, men and women, some barely more than shadows, their faces blurred and shifting. The townspeople greeted them with a mixture of joy and terror, offering food, gifts, whispered words. But none of the returned looked quite right. Their movements were jerky, their eyes too bright, their smiles too sharp. I pressed myself against the wall, heart pounding. A woman brushed past me, her mask slipping from her face. She glanced at me, her eyes dark and knowing. "You'll understand once it chooses you next," she whispered, and then she was gone, swallowed by the crowd. The festival went on until dawn, the lanterns relit, the masks collected and burned in a bonfire that smelled like old bones. I stumbled through the empty streets, dazed, until I reached the town notice board. There, among the faded flyers and lost pet posters, was a missing person notice. My own face stared back at me, younger, eyes wide with hope. The date at the bottom read 2013. I reached out to touch it, and the paper crumbled beneath my fingers. I don't know how long I wandered after finding that poster. Time in Grayer Ridge is a suggestion, not a rule. I remember the sun stuck in the same place, the same song playing from a radio in a window, the same faces passing by again and again. I started to feel like a ghost haunting my own life. It got worse when I checked my phone. I found a video in my camera roll one I didn't remember recording. In it, I'm walking down Main Street, waving at the camera, smiling like I belong here. My voice is cheerful, almost giddy. Welcome to Grayer Ridge, I say, where every day is a new beginning. I watch myself enter the bakery, shake hands with the owner, laugh at a joke I don't remember hearing. The timestamp is from yesterday, but I know I spent yesterday locked in my room, too afraid to go outside. I scrolled through my messages. There were replies to forum threads I never wrote, comments under my own posts that sounded like me but weren't. Great story, can't wait to see what you find next. I'm staying a little longer, there's more to uncover. The words were mine, but the intent was wrong, like a song played in the wrong key. I started seeing myself around town, not just in reflections, but in glimpses, someone ducking into the hardware store as I walked by, someone waving from the window above the diner. Once, I caught a flash of my own jacket disappearing around a corner, the same stain on the sleeve, the same frayed cuffs. I chased after, but the street was empty. The mirrors were the worst. I'd catch my reflection lagging behind, blinking a second too late, smiling when I wasn't. Once, I turned away from the bathroom mirror and saw my reflection still facing forward, eyes locked on mine. I smashed the glass, but the shards all showed different versions of me, some scared, some grinning, some with mouths open in silent screams. The locals started treating me differently. They'd nod as I passed, whispering to each other, eyes shining with anticipation. At the bakery, the owner handed me a loaf of bread and said, "You're almost ready." At the post office, the clerk winked and slid a letter across the counter addressed to me, in my own handwriting. Inside was a single sentence, "Don't fight it. You're home now." I know how this sounds. I know you're probably thinking I've lost it, that I'm making this up for clicks or clout. But if this post ever disappears, check the reflection on the archive thumbnail. Sometimes, if you look close, you'll see a face that isn't quite mine. I tried to reach out for help, but every time I posted, someone replied before I could finish using my name, my avatar, my voice. "I'm fine," they'd write. "Nothing to worry about. Just a little homesick." I started to wonder if I'd ever really left the town at all, or if I'd been replaced the moment I crossed the border. My thoughts are spiraling. I can't trust my own memories. Sometimes I remember arriving here last week, sometimes last year, sometimes I feel like I've always been here. I argue with myself in my head, voices overlapping, contradicting, merging. Tonight, I went back to the Airbnb, desperate for something familiar. The door was unlocked. The lights were on. I stepped inside, and there, sitting at the kitchen table, was me. My own face. My own eyes. Smiling. "Welcome back," my copy said, voice warm and hollow. "We've been waiting for you." I don't know if I ever left that kitchen. I don't know if I ever left the mirror. Everything since then has been fractured, like I'm living in a house of reflections, each one showing a different version of me, some hopeful, some hollow, some already gone. I remember sitting across from myself, the other me smiling with a patience that felt ancient. The room flickered, colors bleeding into each other, the walls pulsing with a heartbeat I could feel in my teeth. My copy reached out, fingers cold and familiar, and when I touched them, I was somewhere else. The world behind the glass is thick and slow, like moving through syrup. I saw the town from above, streets looping in impossible patterns, houses folding in on themselves, the mill at the center like a rotten tooth. I saw faces, hundreds, maybe thousands, pressed against the inside of the mirrors, mouths moving in silent pleas. Some I recognized from old missing persons flyers, some from the festival, some from my own memories. A voice echoed through the glass, layered and distorted, as if 100 people were speaking at once. "You came here because you were curious. You stayed because you were chosen. Every story needs a teller. Every town needs a memory." I tried to argue, to scream, but my words came out in someone else's voice. I saw flashes of the past, deals struck in candlelit rooms, hands shaken over open graves, promises whispered into the dark. Outsiders brought in, one by one, to fill the gaps left by those who vanished. That's how Grayer Ridge survives. It doesn't just keep its dead, it replaces them. I saw myself, younger, standing at the edge of the town, a map in my hand, hope in my eyes. I saw myself older, face blurred, leading someone else down the same road. I saw myself in 100 mirrors, 100 timelines, always searching, always being found. Have you seen this town? Did I post this before? Sometimes I think I've been sending out warnings for years, trapped in a loop, each message a ripple that never quite reaches the shore. Maybe you've read my words before. Maybe you've felt the itch to look for places that don't exist, to chase the stories that everyone else forgets. The scenes flicker past and present, memory and dream. I see Ruth, her mouth full of blood, her eyes pleading. I see the little girl at the festival, her mask slipping, her voice echoing. You'll be part of it soon. I see the landlord, drunk and desperate, whispering, don't dig. I see myself, over and over, knocking on the floor, waiting for an answer. The town is celebrating tonight. Lanterns glow, music drifts through the air, laughter rings out from every window. I hear my own voice joining the chorus, welcoming the next outsider, the next story, the next memory to be devoured. I feel the town's hunger, its need to be remembered, to be real. I feel myself slipping, my memories unraveling, threads pulled loose and rewoven into someone else's life. The door opens. The crowd is waiting. My copy stands beside me, hand on my shoulder, smile wide and empty. Welcome home, they say, and the town erupts in applause. I want to thank you for listening, for making it this far. Not everyone does. Not everyone can. I'm home now. Or at least, I think I am. The air smells right, the coffee tastes the way I remember, and the sun rises and sets on schedule. My phone works again. My inbox is full. My friends say they missed me, though they can't quite remember when I left. I look in the mirror and see my own face, just as it should be. Everything is normal. Everything is fine. But sometimes, when I close my eyes, I hear the clock tower chiming 3:17. I see lanterns swaying in the dark, and I taste apple pie that's just a little too sweet. I wake up with mud on my shoes, leaves in my hair, and the faintest echo of laughter that isn't mine. I tell myself it's just a dream, that I got out, that I'm safe. Funny, isn't it? How easy it is to forget the things that don't want to be remembered. How a story can slip through the cracks. How a name can fade from every record, every memory, every mirror. I used to think I was good at finding the truth. Now I wonder if the truth found me first. If you're hearing this, you're probably wondering if any of it was real, if Grayer Ridge exists, or if it's just another internet ghost story. Maybe you're already searching for the map, or checking your own camera roll for videos you don't remember taking. Maybe you're thinking about visiting, just to see for yourself. If you dream of the mill, don't go back to sleep. I know this post won't last. They never do. The last time I tried to upload something like this, it vanished before anyone could comment. Sometimes, if you refresh the page, you'll see the thumbnail flicker just for a second. If you look closely, you might notice the reflection isn't quite right. Maybe the eyes are too bright. Maybe the smile is too wide. The version of me that posted this may not be me. Comment if I said anything I normally wouldn't. Tell me if you notice anything strange, timestamps, glitches, words that don't sound like mine. I want to know if you see it too. I want to know if you remember me. And if you've ever heard of a place like Grayer Ridge, if you've ever found a town that isn't on any map, or met someone who remembers things that never happened, let me know. Post your theories. Share your stories. Maybe together we can piece it all back together, or at least warn the next person before it's too late. There's another town, just like this one. I have coordinates if you're ready. But be careful. Some places don't want to be found. Some stories don't want to be told. And some doors, once opened, never really close. See you next time, if you're chosen.